time is now at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves.
Matt, thanks very much for joining us today. Your jaw must be very sore after yapping to so many journalists over the last few hours.
I tell you, it's not as bad as a game show floor, but I'll make it through. A little more Coke and maybe some chips.
Can you just sort of give us a bit of background as to what your role is in Assassin's Creed 3 and how long you've been on the project for?
I've been on the project Assassin's Creed 3 for a little over 2 years now. I work very closely with Corey May, who is the writer from AC1 and AC2, on kind of building the story and fleshing out the dialogue of the characters. We've been on it, like I said, for a little over 2 years now, and it's been a really fun road so far, with a crazy amount of information to interpret in terms of historical data. But I think what we've come to is really, really exciting.
Well, sort of talk us through that. During the presentation yesterday, we were told that it's multiple teams. Everyone's got an idea of where they're going. Leads are told, right, this is what you're working with your team. But where does the script come into that? Is the script the backbone of the game, or is that as a small part of many things in the game?
Well, game development is as a collaborative industry as you could possibly have, and the script is definitely important. But I would say that it develops and evolves with the mechanics and the game play side of it. So we're working at the same time, kind of concurrently with everybody, and producing drafts and ideas. And they come back with, okay, well, this doesn't fit with this gameplay mechanic or this system, and then this system would allow us to do this thing. Can you make a story out of that? And then we would go back and try something like that. So it's always a constant back and forth dialogue, and it has to be like to make sure that the game is married to the story perfectly, and want the mechanics to play through in the story as well. And it's a tough job, but it's really fun. And luckily our team is very senior and very good, so it makes our job a lot easier.
So I mean, again, is that per se getting the tone right? You may have written characters, be it the character of Connor or the characters the game meets during the game, and the tone might not sink in with a particular gameplay element that the rest of the team wants.
It happens, and then you have to evolve it, right? Like, and that's the kind of thing when you run into those kind of challenges, or you have to try and address them as quickly as possible and with as little disruption as possible. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but yeah, but that's the thing. Like we have an idea, we always have a core idea. We start from somewhere, and then you start moving forward in it, and it's luckily like where we started was and where we are now is they're actually pretty close in terms of the fundamentals of it. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's changed in between, but you're making bets early on, and then hopefully your bets paid off. And I would say that our team's bets, it's not just writing, like everything across the board, gameplay, tech, like all that stuff. All the bets have been pretty bang on. We've had a really high strike rate, in my experience, higher than I've seen. So it's really gratifying. Like you see it when you saw the TGF. And then you saw our demo, right? Most of the stuff made it through, and you're like, we were right. And like I've been on other places before where you're like, I was wrong, and it's not as you have to try and scramble. We haven't had to do much of that. So yeah, it's a big project, and a lot of people doing amazing things. And
it stretches across, as far as we understand, it stretches across a 30-year period.
That's right.
Now, is that starting with Connor's birth, and we're following him up through the teenage years?
We experience Connor's life, I'll say that, and we want to really have the player learn about and be with Connor through what drives him to become an assassin and being an assassin and why he's doing it. And that's kind of a lot of our story. We wanted it to be a very personal story, and the American Revolution kind of serves as a backdrop to that, right? It's not about that's happening, and Connor is having his own story, and then he joins the assassins, and then that has the assassins Templars level, and that kind of weaves in and out of this kind of tumultuous time of the American Revolution. But it's about those aspects more than it is about the revolution itself, and the revolution kind of colors the narrative as it moves forward. Yeah.
How do you feel? We were also told during the presentation that because there's that much information about this period of history, you know where everybody is, all these important key figures. But is there any way that is it almost like too restrictive in a way where you can't be creative to an extent, because you go, well, this guy's here at this particular point, but for our story we want him over here?
I definitely. I mean, it's funny. We talk about writing a similar kind of story. Say, an example of the Crusades in the ACU one. There's a lot more leeway because the historical record is more of a structure. It's like a framework. Like this happened, and you can kind of connect your own dots, which leaves you a lot of freedom, which is nice. But at the same time, in this case, we had this great record, right? And we know where all these people were, and we know down to like a day-to-day basis what was going on. Where that it can be restrictive in some cases. Also, it allows us this opportunity to really paint a picture of what it was like to be around these people, like these people that are household names like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and people have this kind of glazed over version of who they are, like on the American money, right? That's Washington, but we get to see him as a man, as a person existing in this extraordinary time, and how he dealt with that. And he made mistakes, and he was worried about things, and he got angry, and he had like moments of doubt, and he was a human being, right? And that to me is way more interesting of a story than this guy who's like, I'm gonna save the world. That's not what he was like. And for us to be able to really flesh that out as accurately as we can, yes, it can be challenging at times, but when we hit it, it's really, really cool, and I think the players are going to be excited to get in there and learn about and experience these people.
Well, I was going to say that we've got the historical fact of where these people were, but in setting the actual personality of these people, there must be a certain element of creativity there. Yeah. Well, how do you feel like American audiences are going to respond to your interpretation of George Washington? And so
that's the interesting one, right? That's the big question, because it's a big audience, obviously, and they have a lot of conviction and passion about that topic. My general sense, at least, is a lot of the common knowledge of that history is a little bit glossy. And it isn't necessarily as deep and as profound as what we're going for. So if we can cross that line, and our goal is to be like, oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing, and I want to see how that and explore that myself. And if we can achieve that, then like that's a huge win. As far as it will be a success, I really hope so. I mean, we'll have to wait and see till it comes out. But yeah, and that's outside of just Americans. I think the fantasy of what's happening at that time is just a universally interesting thing to do, and you have to realize that America didn't exist until 1783, which is when our game ends. So before that, which is when the game is, it's just England. But it is, right? I mean, it's a colony, and that the war was looked at largely as a civil war fought on foreign soil, and that's a very different perception than what people think of. It's like America versus the British. It was families against each other, and it was friends against each other, and it was people who were all subjects of the king, like having a fight, and that's pretty raw and intense, and I think it's also relevant to people on a global scale, not just. I
was going to say, because the broad strokes are, like we're saying, people are going to think it's just America versus Brits, as it were.
That's not what it was. A global conflict at the time, right? It was a world war. I mean, the French were up in north in Canada, and they were, and Franklin was over there in Paris lobbying for the French support, and you get the Spanish down south that are having pressure up there, and there's this big war happening in the West Indies. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's really. The outcome of the American Revolution has major impacts across the world, including France, which sparks the French Revolution, right? So, like, you think about what it actually happened and what it meant to the countries that were involved. It's just a really interesting piece of history and interesting time, and the fact that America came out of it that's just the end result. But the actual events were just this.
Well, given that the whole Templar assassin thing has always had an element of secrecy about it, but this. Whereas Assassin's Creed 2, almost what did happen in secret. This feels like, as you said, there's more global repercussions to this. Does this mean Templars and Assassins will be a lot more apparent in the implications of what happens in this war?
The Assassin's Templar narrative in AC is always the fantasies that it's behind the curtain, and that's no different in this one. I would say the conflict itself is more global, but how the Assassins and Templars influence it is definitely going to be that same feeling of it being, clandestine, kind of behind the curtain a little bit. And I think that's important to the fantasy and fiction as well. So, because that's how the Assassins and Templars roll, man. They're secretive.
But to sort of wind up, going back to the character of Connor. There's multiple references through the presentation about about the level of violence in the game, and particularly towards the wildlife, about clean kills. There's just an emphasis. This is clean kills. Is that as much of a story implementation as it is a gameplay driven aspect? Because you want. Is that because the character of Connor, his background says it?
The character of Connor, like I said, we wanted someone who was outside the conflict and had his own motivations aside from liberty or tyranny or any of that kind of stuff. And yeah, the stuff about clean kills, the way that he moves, the way that he deals with people in combat, that's all very personal to him. And I think that translates in the way that he talks as well, and the way that he is as a character, as an assassin. I think he's a very individual assassin. But for us, it was really important to set him apart from previous assassins. He needed to have his own reasons for being an assassin that were different than the previous assassins. He needed to have his own way of fighting and his own way of going about everyday assassin's business. So I think that for us, stuff like clean kills and that definitely feeds into that and is a part of that fantasy and that fiction. And hopefully that players will be. When I play him right now, he's a really fun character to play. Like the way that he moves and the way that he fights and how fluid he is in the frontier, in the cities and stuff. It's a whole new way of playing. And whenever I get my hands on him, I'm like, yeah, coming in there, and it's really cool.
So basically, it's Connor's truth, justice, but not necessarily the American way.
Well, no, that's it. Though Connor's justice is not always in line with the American way. I can say that for sure. And it's not always in line with the British way. It's his. Right, it's his motivations and where those fall, and in terms of the assassins and the Templars, that depends. So it's not definitely America versus British. It's Templar versus assassin, and wherever that winds up, it's always in some gray area.
Listen, thank you very much indeed for taking time. Looking forward to seeing the rest of it.
Thank you very much.